Welcome back, venturers. It's time for another discussion about VNs. I am Emar, and together with Tauros, we shall discuss the ways in which VNs allows readers to customize their experience. From toggles and sliders in the options menu to having developers release different editions of their titles altogether. There are myriad of ways in which a reader can experience seemingly the same title. I seem to have reverted, for now, back to my default microphone settings. I need a customization guru, so Tauros, guide me.
Yes, customization not just in visual novels, but with your poor sound system as well. But that's fine. We're going to move on ahead into the wonderful literary land of various forms of storytelling in visual novels. But there's more importance than just the story itself. It's all about how we, the readers, interact with that story. All the technical details in that options menu. That's right. Because it's the year 2025, and nowadays, visual novels are expected to have certain customization options available at the player's control. Things like skipping red text, or having multiple save files available, or being able to quick save and quick load. These are like the basics that we should expect out of any visual novel functionality. And so to a certain degree, I guess we could factor this into the whole customization aspect of visual novels, but I still want to mention these basics that really are just more foundational aspects. There's some visual novels too that have like advanced skipping materials, such as skipping any animations, and how if it's skipping red text, it'll continue beyond the choices as well. Those are always appreciated, like whenever I'm trying to reread visual novels to unlock new routes, make different choices along the way. I want to get to the good stuff, right? I don't want to be sitting there constantly toggling like control or the skip button over the same parts of the common route.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly, right, Amar?
And I think one level above that, skipping animation, because basically, let's be honest, if there is an option about speeding up animation, it's all about time. You just optimize the time to flow until you encounter a piece of the literary work you haven't yet read. And one level above that, I think Fate uniquely skips the entire events from rendering. You don't see those sprites going super fast, zipping through lines. No, you actually skip the entire events altogether until you reach a point that is either a choice or something you haven't had encountered before, and then it stops.
Yeah, Fate Stay Night was crazy. They would just show you an
That's
option
it.
at the beginning, like, hey, do you want to skip this entire scene? And you could just hit yes or no, and it'd have like this static, normal background or whatever. It was like a menu option instead of reading through the story.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not quite sure how it handled options that appeared inside that event. I feel like it literally gave you buttons, press that options without rendering even the image. So sometimes if you haven't paid attention and didn't remember where that choice is from, like, wait a moment. When that was like, oh, okay, now I remember. You had to retrace the steps in your mind.
Oh my gosh. Another basic option that should always be in VNs nowadays is individual character voice adjustments. You can usually dive into like the options menu in the volume, and there will be a list of like all of the voiced characters, and you can individually set the sliders to how loud you want their voices, or in some terrible cases, you could mute them. So you could be reading a VN with a whole cast of lively voices, and then just silence for one character if you just really hate her or something. Oh, my poor heart.
That's actually funny. Although I don't think I've ever used that option. The ability to customize volumes of all characters independently. I don't think I've ever used that. Have you?
No, even if there's a certain character or voice actor who is really grating on my nerves. I still endure it because that's part of the experience of the VN. If it has bad parts to it, then it's like, I gotta acknowledge that instead of just pretending it doesn't exist. But that's just my personal philosophy.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I'm a VN veteran. I take those, okay?
You'll grit your
I face
teeth.
them head on. I don't pussy out.
No.
I don't mute people.
And then I think there's some titles that offer a lot of fidelity with the text box in adjusting like how transparent it is, or even a few different styles.
Sometimes even you can customize the position. So for example, an offset from the corners.
Ooh.
That's also unique.
Mm-hmm.
The craziest customization with the text itself, I think I've consistently run into in PurpleSoft titles, such as Happy Mail, and I've included screenshots to that in the background. They allowed you to customize a color that is rendered when a given character speaks to the point in which you can choose two colors and a gradient way of how it will transition. So that's crazy to me that you can customize not only two colors, how they change, but also gradient rendering options.
Oh my goodness. Yeah,
Crazy.
because I always like seeing that in other titles where various characters' names will be color-coded, or in some cases, even their dialogue, the words they speak, will be in a different text color. But having the option to change them yourself, you could custom make them any color you want. Like if you wanted to, you could set all of them to like lime green.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Oh, that's super cool.
I remember there aren't many titles I've used that option on, but Baldur's Sky and quite a bit of PurpleSoft titles, I did mess around with those a bit.
What?
Especially Baldur's Sky had the distinction between spoken dialogue by protagonist and inner monologue in two different colors.
Nice, that's an important consideration.
Yeah, exactly. That was amazing.
To be honest, I think these are all somewhat under the umbrella of common quality of life improvements. So that this isn't entirely what our main focus on this episode today is for. But rather, these are things that either should be seen or I hope to see in pretty much every modern visual novel release. But there is more to that. There's more, especially in, I guess you could say, different versions of a visual novel. And one example that comes to mind is with Lucy, the Eternity She Wished For. It was originally released as a Doujin visual novel, and much later, there was a Kickstarter campaign to, I guess you could say, remaster it with improved art and better graphics, better aspect ratios and all of that. And they did. But they offered DLC to restore the sprite and CG art to the original Doujin material. So if you go on Steam and you buy the base version of Lucy the Eternity She Wished For, you get some very pretty art and modern day, amazing graphics and all of that. But if you want that classic feel, then you have another option for you to, in a sense, patch your game to get the classic art style, which is, far more amateurish, and it has a less of that anime sheen to it. So that option is there if you want to experience the game, experience the visual novel in your own kind of flavor. And I think that's a good example of the kind of customization that can be offered from the developer to the player.
I completely agree. It reminds me of a time in which Umineko, when they got released in English, they updated the sprites, but gave you an option to switch to the classic sprites as the author envisioned. And the division within the community of Umineko readers became which are the true sprites you should use. Obviously, probably jokingly, people were comparing which is the true Umineko experience. Do you go with the classics or the revision art?
There's
But it's actually a great idea for an option.
there's multiple revision art, isn't there? I'm very unaware of Umineko. That whole situation scares me. I know
that's true.
I know I mentioned that having customization is a good thing and it allows for more options, but this is too much. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know if I pick up Umineko, I don't know if I'm going to be reading it the, quote, right way or not, or if I'm going to get some terribly sullied experience.
Oh god.
It's scary.
It is scary and it is funny at the same time. When it comes to the revision of the art style, probably the loudest one in the recent year has to go to Steins Gate Elite version, which is customization insofar that you have a different version altogether, a remake, that seemingly only change the art style, but apparently also added new content. In my opinion, the way the original Steingate looked is way superior to the Elite version. So I guess that puts me in the camp of the true believers in Yumineko classic experience. I suppose. Maybe I'm that. On the other hand, the new Elite version also introduces new content. So I don't know, it kind of lures you in with that.
I like how you mentioned the new content, because that's always the worrisome aspect, is that it's nice when it's always about adding new content, but there's some cases like Nekopara where what is new in a release kind of conflicts with the existing material, right?
Yes. Nekopara is such a curious case in which they have two completely different all-age releases. Let me elaborate. So, Nekopara started as a game on Steam, and in order to be published on Steam, they developed an all-ages version and then introduced an 18 plus patch in the third-party website source. So you have to patch your game. But over time, they grew up in popularity to such an extent, Nekopara has been accepted on Nintendo Store for Nintendo Switch. There isn't any patching whatsoever, at least allowed, on Switch, so they had to come up with a version specifically for Switch, de facto complete. And what they did, instead of just porting as is the PC all-aged edition, they decided to recreate the missing content from all ages PC version in a new alternative manner for Switch. So now, funnily enough, for the volume 1, 2, and 3, and funny enough, only for those three, there exist two completely different all ages versions depending on whether or not you play it on Switch or on Steam.
So I'm assuming the way that you're describing it is that on Steam, the all ages version would simply fade to black when those H scenes were happening?
Exactly. To maybe explain it the simplest, it seems the PC takes the default version of 18 plus, and to have an all ages version, all they do is cut content. Whereas for the Nintendo Switch, they rebuilt the missing content with something completely new, and that's the default and only version on the Nintendo Switch.
Oh, okay. So then a Nintendo Switch would be instead of a blank nothing, something happened off screen. It's instead you get to see I'm just making something up, like some romantic other scene instead of them gazing at the stars or something. Again,
Yeah,
I'm
they
making
went
something
to
up.
arcade or something. Yeah, exactly. Something
Exactly.
completely different.
It's the difference between there just being nothing, just assume something happened, and here's a replacement of a different kind for that H scene. That's interesting. So in
Yeah,
fact,
it's
this does lead to having, I guess you could say, two different versions of Nekopara. Whether you imagine that things got
exactly.
hot and heavy or not.
Yeah, and as a cat girl mate and connoisseur, imagine my surprise. I have all the Necoparas and I see some new leaked footage from the game I already played. Where's that from? I was so confused until I understood. Oh, it's the Nintendo Switch exclusive event.
There you go. See, that's no stranger. When someone remakes or remasters a title and it's got to put in a little bit of bonus content so that people will buy it again. That's what happened with the
Yes.
Ace Attorney games too. They were originally released on the Game Boy Advance, and then they got remade for the Nintendo DS, I believe, along with an English option. So this was the first time the games were coming out in English. But the first game, Phoenix Wright, then had a bonus case involved, Rise from the Ashes. So for any Japanese fans out there, if they enjoyed the series on the Game Boy Advance, it's like, oh boy, here's a new, bigger, final case to take on that you have to buy it again. I guess this is one time the Americans got a lucky break here, because you were just going to experience Ace Attorney from the start. The whole package right at once.
That's surprisingly common. How often I hear about titles that exist only in a singular release in English, but has multiple releases and or editions in Japanese. So for example, Bald Sky, which is a great example for today's episode customization, has been divided into two entries. You had to both own and connect somehow to start a singular VN. But in English VN, it's just a single title that has everything pre-prepared, so you don't need to do any outside machinations of installing one game on top of another. And in addition to that, I think I mentioned that before when I talked about Baldur's Sky. Baldur's Sky, in it of itself, is a story about regaining memories, one of which aspect is, in this setting, cyberpunkish futuristic one, that your UI and customization options open up the more memories you recover and more grasp on the current situation you get as a protagonist. And it's quite unique in which you quite literally see how your UI improves the more and the deeper you are into the game. I mean, all those options are still optional. You can disable those and customize your UI the way you like it. But it's still funny to see how your UI itself progresses along with the story.
Yeah, when you say UI customization, is that just like the layout, the colors, the style? Is it all just purely cosmetic?
Yes, but some of them are also functional. I don't
Functional, what do you
want
mean?
to go to extent, to which extent they are functional, but you have a UI that will be, whether or not you enable that or not, will have a reflection in the story itself as well.
Oh, okay. So there is a gameplay story factor involved. Ah, cool.
I wouldn't say gameplay, but rather a feedback loop between UI, your customization, and how the story progresses.
Ooh, intriguing.
Interesting, because it's all about futuristic interfaces, so it actually makes a lot of sense in that setting.
Okay.
And speaking of a very unique interfaces, I was always shocked in the Kickstarter version of the Venus Blood titles. They always ask you whether or not you want to play the classic game or the new release. So let me elaborate. During the translation process and translation project for the Venus Blood titles, one of the stretch goals is to create new characters or new events. So literally, backers on Kickstarter, by giving an extra funding to that project, can fund more content. Now, majority of that content is somewhat small and more related to the gameplay portion, but there were a couple of important stretch goals, even in the very first Kickstarter, that founded a story element that has been incorporated to the story itself, and you have one more chapter of the story. So the game itself asks you, listen, if you want to experience it as it was originally, we also give you the option to play the Venus Blood Classic, or maybe you want the full experience as the vision has been realized since the Kickstarter project. So that's super unique.
Vision realized from Kickstarter project. What do you mean by that?
As in, people who funded the extra content will have that content incorporated in the story. So, and the choices and progression that has been made in that chapter makes sense story-wise. So I'll give you maybe a very generic example. In the Venus Blood, the very first one, there's a character that is quite important but only mentioned in passing, like an ancient hero or something. Okay? And by the end of the game, you've never encountered that person, ever. The story ends, you concluded, everything ended.
Okay.
In the international version, there's an extra chapter in which you can not only meet that character, speak with that character, but also it will influence how the story unfolds further. That's something that did not ever exist in the original.
Wow, that feels
completely...
like a sizable content upgrade.
Yes, but it cannot be understated that it did influence the story. So for those who want the pure classic experience, have the options to say, no bueno, I want to see the first version, before it had been altered. Now, we can question whether or not that was a big alteration or not. Was it seamlessly done? I think it was, very tactfully. But some people want an option to say, no, I want to see how it was originally. And Venus Blood gives you that option in the settings.
Okay. That's very nice. That sense of version control, of letting people have the kind of experience they want.
Exactly.
In a sense, it's kind of like when video games offer DLC, where it starts you off with like some super mega powerful weapons.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, if the game does it responsibly, they make sure to give you these weapons at a specific point in the story where it's appropriate. And if they're not responsible about it, they just don't care. It's here, open your mail, and it's like, here's some God Destroyer +1 99 attack thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the God Destroyer. Closer to the ends, I think, when it comes to the topic of customization and something you can set up at the start. In Newton, specifically, they had an option to choose whether or not the game will use honorifics.
Oh my goodness.
So, funny enough, this is the opposite from Venus Blood, because you have something that is ever present in the text, but has barely any influence on the story. Other than, the text, how it is translated.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so funny to see a setting that is literally honorifics, yes, no, on, off.
And it's a toggle in the options menu, right?
Yep.
You could go in the middle of any scene, you could just flip that switch, and then the rest of the text will update?
I'm not sure about the current displayed text, but the next ones would update. That's true.
Right, of course. Wow. That has got to be a huge programming marvel. And also for the, I guess you could say for the translators, for keeping track of everything in the story. That's an entire another set of terms to use, and it could show up all over the place. Ooh, that does not sound easy. But I'm sure that's one of those choices that all sorts of VN readers can be happy with, though. If you feel strongly about the issue, then you have this that caters to it. But if not, then, it's there, buried away in the options, and it's never going to be intrusive.
Exactly. Obviously, I anticipate having to prepare such an option is not an easy task, but once it's completed, now it gives the power to the reader, whether or not they prefer a translation with or without honorifics. And that's crazy nice. Unlike unlike the alternative, in which if you feel strongly about that, you need to find a third-party resource or someone's alteration files of how many times have you heard about the retranslation files, right? For example.
Yeah, every so often you hear about a group of people taking it upon themselves to fix a certain translations script. And those efforts have varying degrees of success. And it's always interesting because I know we've been talking a lot about how the developers are to be adding version controls and various options for their titles, but there's also many ways in which fan translators also do their best to accompany everything involved. And one of my favorite go-to examples that I've mentioned a few times before is Never7. They have something they call an append system that allows readers to basically create their own Never7 scenes. It'll let you provide your own script, and then you can also decide like the backgrounds and the characters on screen and the specific sprites and emotions and when they come out and when they disappear and who else pops in, like its own version of Ren'Py. And I always thought that was cool, but the real joy from it came when the fan translators who released a patch for it for English also included a spin-off story in this append system. There was a route that was released for like the Neo Geo, like some handheld console, exclusive to Japan. And so instead of trying to figure out an emulator for that and getting that standalone little route, they just, in a sense, copied over that text into the append system. And so you could read Never7, finish that up, go into the little append system, and read this little side story thanks to Never7's own custom engine that you could mess around with.
That's crazy.
I know, it was crazy for Never7 to have it in the first place, and then again for the fan translators to rig that up and get it working in it.
Yeah, because the first thing that comes to my mind is you can recreate content that is hard to access by fans who don't speak Japanese. Okay, so one example I have in my mind. In the Steam edition of Date Alive games, they included bonus content in form of drama CDs, which are basically you can listen to an audio recording of characters speaking, and they are never translated. So this is one piece of the content I can't interact with. So if they were given the tools to the same level as Ever7 has, then the fans could recreate those scenes using the engine of the game. That would be amazing.
But are we still waiting? Still waiting for that to someday happen?
Yeah.
Aww.
The best I could is some transcript of those audio CDs on fan Discord. That's the best I found.
Oh, well, see, that's a good effort too, you know?
Yeah, this is at the release. I understand what happened there instead of those are sounds, and they sometimes say Onichan.
Darn. And I think one last little aspect of this, of the whole customization option, is the very intriguing world of mods. Visual novels are a digital form of entertainment, and video games have seen all sorts of different mods and all sorts of different games. But since visual novels are more of a storytelling experience, that's never really played into it. But when you have some gameplay focused titles, like maybe Rance or Venus Blood, then there are some mods that get involved, just like with gameplay video games. Like, I think you've mentioned a few in the past, right, MR, of all sorts of optimization stuff?
Yeah. Okay, so there's a lot of things. Let's start with probably official mods. Okay, let's start oddly enough with official ones.
Wow.
So back in 2019, when Sengoku Runs has been released by Manga Gamer, they created what is a streamer patch. So hilariously enough, in community of VNs that have popularized the R18 plus patches, this one is uniquely the R negative patch because it makes the game all ages.
Oh.
And by proxy makes it good to stream on Twitch because it removes the 18 plus content and the game still has so much content and story to present. It still is enjoyable to both play and stream. That's one part. And the second iteration of that idea can be seen within Evenical 2 option menu, because that's the game that officially supports the streaming mode that is literally built-in checkbox, whether or not, oh, I'm going to stream. Yes, then let us handle all those HScene. We'll skip them for you. Like, holy hell, that's hilarious. No, those are the official, let's say, mods. But then someone went crazy and said, what if, similarly how Ever 7 shown the power of open engine, and how we as fans can use it, some mad lad took Sengoku Runs and modded a different title within that title. So you can play Runs 10 inside Sengoku Runs because someone recreated a different title within that title.
Oh my gosh.
So that's crazy. Still, they couldn't quite capture the story aspect, but as much as possible they tried to replicate some minor interaction between characters and dialogue, and utilize to the full extent the gameplay to emulate how the future events will transpire in a represented by gameplay. If not, they couldn't do story bits. Okay. It's crazy. From the Venus Blood, so the game, sorry, not Venus Blood, from the Gears of Dragoon 2, a game I'm currently finishing up, the mod that has been popularized is the one that optimizes the load time in the game and renders a minimap. Just like that. So someone created a mod that you can customize even further beyond. So beyond granting you new features, the mod itself enables more customizations, such as transparency settings, the key rebinding for the UI, because that's atypical in VNs. In my opinion, regrettably, more VNs should be open to the idea of rebinding keybinds. But that mod said, no, we gotcha. We allow you to rebind some keyboard. So yes, I can finally advance the text with the one and only spacebar.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you had to end it on that note. Oh, it makes me sick.
It was.
How dare you?
It is important. It is important.
No.
The spacebar supremacy must continue.
No. Enter and left click are the only acceptable ones.
Those are good alternatives. I'll agree with you on that.
They are the alternative. But on that note, yes, there's so many customization options, from the options menus to the official tools to all sorts of even fan efforts. And so I thought that's really neat how something as simple as a visual novel story can be subject to so many different approaches in how encompassing it should be.
Yeah, and in my opinion, the more options, the better, because you can find the set of options that work with you. And the one that I want to end on today's episode with, I'll probably remind you that the official MavLab English release allows you to pick which kind of CGs you prefer, the modified with English text on them or the original Japanese CGs. That was super cool that the game allowed you to pick out of all of them. And on that accent, thanks all our listeners. I hope you also have some run-ins with customization you could share it on the comments.
Yes, so let us know all about it, and if any are your favorites in particular.
Exactly. On that note, venture out.
Venture out.